Flat Stanley, Chapter 3. Stanley the Kite. Mr. Ramchop had always liked to take the boys out with him on Sunday afternoon to the museum or roller skating the park. But it was difficult when they were crossing the street or moving around about in crowds. Stanley and Arthur would often be jostled from his side, and Mr. Ramchop worried about speeding taxis or that hurrying people might accidentally knock them down. It was easier after Stanley got flat. Mr. Ramchop discovered that he could roll Stanley up without hurting him at all. He would tie a piece of string around Stanley to keep him from unrolling and make a little loop in the string for himself. It was as simple as carrying a packle, and he could hold an other with another hand. Stanley did not mind being carried because he had never much liked to work. Arthur didn't like work either, but he had to. It made him mad. On Sunday afternoon in the street, they met Ralph Jones, the old college friend of Mr. Ramchop's. "Well, George, I see you have bought some wallpaper," Mr. Jones said. "Going to decorate your house, I suppose?" "Wallpaper?" said Mr. Ramchop. "Oh no, this is my son Stanley." He undid the string and Stanley unrolled. "How do you do?" Stanley said. "Nice to meet you, young feller." The man said, "George," he said to Mr. Ramchop, "that boy is a flat." "Smart too," Mr. Ramchop said. "Stanley is a third from the top in his class at school." "Pooh," said Arthur. "This is my younger son, Arthur," Mr. Ramchop said, "and he will apologize for his lewdness." Arthur could only brush his and apologize. Mr. Ramchop rolled Stanley up again, and they set out for home. It rained quite hard while they were on the way. Stanley, of course, hardly got wet at all, just around the edge, but Arthur got soaked. Late at night, Mr. Ramchop heard a noise out in the living room. They found Arthur lying on the floor near the bookcase. He had piled a great many volumes of the Cyclopedia Britannica on top of himself. "Put some more on me," Arthur said. When he saw them, "Don't just stand there. Help me." Mr. and Mrs. Ramchop sent him back to bed, but the next morning they spoke to Stanley. "Arthur can't help being jealous," they said. "Be nice to him. You're his big brother, after all." The next Sunday, Stanley and Arthur went to the park by themselves. The day was sunny, but windy too, and many older boys were flying beautiful, enormous kites with long tails made in all the colors of the rainbow. Arthur sighed. "Someday," he said, "I will have a big kite, and I will win a kite flying contest and be famous like everyone else. Nobody knows who I am these days." Stanley remembered what his parents had said. He went to the boy whose kite was broken and borrowed a large spool of string. "You can fly me, Arthur," he said. "Come on." He attached the string to himself and gave Arthur the spool to hold. He ran lightly across the grasses sideways to get up speed and then turned to meet the breeze. Up, 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 up went Stanley being a kite. He knew just how to manage on the gusts of the wind. He faced full into the wind if he wanted to rise, and let it take him from behind when he wanted to speed. He had only to turn his thin edge to the wind, carefully a little at a time, so that it did not hold him, and then he would slip gracefully down towards the earth again. Arthur let out all the string, and Stanley, soaring high above the tree, beautiful sight in his red shirt and blue trouser against the pale blue sky. Everyone in the park stood still to watch. Stanley swooped right and then left in wrong match to swooped. He held his arm by his side and zoomed at the ground like a rocket and curved up against toward the sun. His side split and circled and made figure eights and crosses and their star. Nobody has ever flown the way Stanley Lambchop flew that day. Probably no one ever will again. After a while, of course, people grew tired of the watching, and Arthur got tired of the running around with the empty spool. Stanley went right on, those showing off. Three boys came up to Arthur, and they invited him to join them for a hot dog and some soda pop. Arthur left the spool wedge in the fork of the tree. He did not notice while he was eating the hot dog that wind was blowing the string and tangled about the tree. The string got shorter and shorter, but Stanley did not realize how long he was until leaves brushed his feet, and then it was too late. He got stuck in the branches. 15 minutes passed before Arthur and the other boys heard his cry and climb up to set him free. Stanley would not speak to his brother that evening and at bedtime. Even though Arthur had apologized, he was still cross. Along with Mr. Ramchap in the living room, Mrs. Ramchap sighed and shook her head. "You are at the office all day having fun," she said. "You don't realize what I go through with the boys. They are very difficult." "Kids are like that," Mr. Ramchap said. "Patience. Be patient, dear."